It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Well, hello and welcome to this Tuesday with Lyndsey. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. This is RealAg Radio, and I am super pleased to be with you here today. Of course, it was a long weekend here. We had a great time being outside, so much as we could be until the rain, and I mean torrential downpours, chased us back inside, but got some projects done, which is nice, but no hay. So for all of you following along with the chronicles of hay 2023, it's still gross. Thanks for that. All right. We've got a great show lined up for you, though. I'm really excited about this one. Some pretty fascinating conversations lined up. You're going to hear from Kelly Daynard with Farm and Food Care Canada. Her and Bern Tobin, my colleague Bern, have a great conversation lined up here on Breakfast on the Farm. So this is an event that happens here in Ontario. Farm and Food Care Ontario puts it on. And, of course, it did pause during the pandemic. So we're back up and running. We're going to hear what it takes to run a breakfast on the farm and what it's all about. I've also got, for the first time on the show, Erin Morgan. She's the Executive Director of Ontario Sheep Farmers, and she's been in that role almost a year. So, yes, Sean, I do hold back on having too much sheep content, because she could have been on here before, just saying. Anyway, we have a increase in the license fee, also known as the checkoff, for when you sell lambs. The increase is happening October 1. So Erin's going to join me to talk about what the increase is, why now, where that money is going to go. And this is important to note for anyone out west who ships lambs to Ontario, which is very common. This, of course, impacts you as well, because this checkoff is paid for every lamb sold in the province, and that includes from out of province as well. Then I've got Dr. Gabriel Ribeiro. He's with the University of Saskatchewan, and I want to know all about ergot. So for those of you who maybe followed along, we had ergot poisoning in our lambs last year who were out on pasture. And ever since then, I've sort of taken a keen interest in this disease and how it happens. And it just so happens that the Beef Cattle Research Council has put out a bit of an alert on ergot, because it is sort of the time of year that it's top of mind for many producers. So check that out as well. And then to round out the show, yes, bear with me. I'm going to try and do some news because, well, it's Tuesday. We didn't have a show yesterday and a lot has happened. So I'm going to try and cover as many as those stories as I can. All right. As always, feedback on the show. We love it. Send us a message, 1-855-776-6147, or you can find us across social media at Real Agriculture. Without further ado, let's have a quick break and we'll be back with the show right after this. Registration is now open for the Canadian Beef Industry Conference coming August 15th to 17th to Calgary, Alberta, brought to you by McDonald's. Spend time networking on the trade show floor, hear from keynote speakers, and take in breakout sessions designed to increase profit, manage your rangeland, and navigate trends. Get up close to advanced techniques and hands-on demos and experience bullfighting at the closing party. Proud, innovative, and loyal, we are beef. Visit CanadianBeefIndustryConference.com for full details and to register.
Introducing the Arion 600 Series tractor by Claas, where versatility meets productivity head-on, because you've got jobs to do. Mowing, tedding, raking, baling, loading, filling, tilling, cleaning, spreading, hauling, feeding. This is multi-purpose reimagined to do the work for you. It's more than just power. The Arion 600 tractor gets it done.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up-to-date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host on this Tuesday, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by Koch Agronomic Services. Low-rate NBPT solutions claim to protect nitrogen, but no imitator product delivers like Anval Nitrogen Stabilizer, the next-gen urease inhibitor from Koch Agronomic Services. See how others stack up to the proven power for Anval at defendyourn.ca. All right, going now, as promised, I've got a great interview here with Bern Tobin, here with Real Agriculture, and Kelly Daynard, who's the Executive Director of Farm and Food Care Ontario, and they discuss what it takes to put on a breakfast on the farm.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin. Welcome to Real Agriculture. Today, we're talking about breakfast on the farm. Farm and Food Care Ontario started hosting these events back in 2013 to help share the farming story with consumers. The next breakfast event will take place at Ripplebrook Farm, a dairy operation in Napanee, Ontario, on August 26th. To talk about the event, its history, and the role they play in communicating with consumers, I'm joined by Kelly Daynard, the Executive Director of Farm and Food Care Ontario. Hi, Kelly. Hey, thanks for stopping by.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, Kelly, for people listening who haven't been to a breakfast on the farm, give us a snapshot of what visitors typically see at the event.
Yeah, so I literally can't believe we have been hosting these now for 10 years, and they are the most amazing events. I think our team always jokes that we call them I Love My Job Days, because you are seeing Ontario agriculture through the eyes of people who maybe have never seen a cow before, maybe have never seen a chicken, and they come and they meet, all of these glorious farm volunteers, and they get to ask their questions straight from the farm. So we might be on a dairy farm, but you're also going to have, the apple growers there, and grain farmers there, and beef farmers there, and egg farmers of Ontario there. So, they may be coming to tour one type of farm, but they are really getting a broad overview of agriculture at its best.
So how many events have you done over the years, and who are those typical visitors?
So, COVID got really challenging for us, and so we started them in 2013. We stole the idea with permission from a group in Michigan who had really perfected the planning of these breakfast on the farms, and they held several events a year. A team from our staff went down there in 2011 or 2012, and were hosted by this beautiful Michigan group who said, hey, take our ideas and Ontario-wise it. So our first one in 2013 was in New Dundee at Heritage Hill Farms, and we have done about 2 a year since then, except during COVID. And 2020, we couldn't figure out a way to make a modified event, so our events got canceled that year. 2021, we did some drive-through events where guests were able to drive through a fairgrounds and talk to farmers from the safety of their cars. And at the end of the day, they popped their trunks and we put a breakfast bag in it so they could go home and host. And then last year, we also did them on fairgrounds, kind of walk-through events. This year, we are back on farm and thrilled to be there. Typical visitors would be urban consumers from the local areas where we're hosting in these events. We tend to see way more urban visitors than rural visitors, but we draw from a long ways. So we were just in Huron County at the end of June, and some of the guests I talked to there were from Fort Erie, were from Toronto. They had seen the promotions that we had done and thought that was an amazing opportunity to see a farm, so they had driven several hours. But these are by and large urban consumers who may never have been on a farm, and that's the beautiful part of these events.
So over the years, Kelly, how many people have attended the events? It must be tens of thousands. And why is it important for them to visit the farm?
I don't have exact numbers, but I would guess we are getting close to 30,000 plus people that have been to these events over the years. I think it's really important because we in agriculture, I don't regardless of whether you're a cucumber grower or a dairy farmer, we have amazing stories to tell, and people have an awful lot of questions about where their food comes from. Most Canadians now don't know a farmer, so they, potentially read something scary in the news or on the internet, and they have a lot of questions. And so I think it's really important to open the doors and engage with these people and just show them the great stories that we have to tell. And the response we have at the end, we send out surveys to our guests, and the responses are just overwhelmingly positive. They've come, they've asked the questions, they feel like they're a little more engaged with Canadian agriculture, and that's a good thing for anybody in this industry.
Now, what role does the farming community and industry play in Breakfast on the Farm? I mean, I'm sure you need plenty of volunteers and financial support to make it happen.
Oh my gosh, yes. So these events cost about somewhere in the range of $50,000 to pull off because it is a free event. We've started charging $5 for people to register, and that's essentially just for them to hold a spot. And then when they attend, they have the chance to get their money back, and that just covers our costs if they weren't to show up with that free ticket. But the farming community is everything. So we have these incredible local committees. Like I said, we just finished one in Huron County, and oh my goodness, we had about 130 volunteers show up that day to put on the blue volunteer shirt and operate one of the stations, whether it was parking, whether it was serving food, whether it was answering questions about that combine or sprayer or beef cow. So we really need a pile of volunteers, and then there's the donations that come in from local associations and agribusinesses. We couldn't do it without them.
Now, I would think attending a Breakfast on the Farm is also, a good opportunity for farmers. They can certainly learn a lot from interacting with, that non-farming audience.
I agree. I think, that's always a side reward that we maybe don't think about when we're organizing these things, but if you had attended the volunteer lunch that we had following the Breakfast on the Farm in June, you just saw the smiles on our volunteers' faces as they recounted, the stories that they had with their interactions and the questions they're asked. Everything from how many eggs does a hen lay to how much does that combine cost, and everything in between. One of the farmers was getting people to guess what the combine cost, and the guesses were ranging from $5,000 to $30,000. And so when he explained that was $1 million piece of equipment, people are just absolutely dazzled by that. They don't have a sense of the scope.
For sure. Hey, finally, tell us a little bit about the August 26th event. What can people expect when they visit the McLean family dairy at Ripplebrook Farm?
Well, first of all, I have to say this has been the longest Breakfast on the Farm in the making ever for us, because this beautiful family were ready to go in 2020. Their promotional video was done, the date was set, the caterer was booked, and then COVID happened. And so we had remained in close contact with that family throughout the pandemic, and we're trying to figure out, when was the best time to revive this visit. And we wanted to do it right because the farm is so beautiful. So we are going to Kevin and Joanne McLean's dairy farm, Ripplebrook Farms. It's right on Highway 2, just outside of Napanee, Ontario. It is a beautiful multi-generation family farm. There's 3 generations living and working on it. This farm is just spectacular. So you will be touring a dairy farm and enjoying an all-Ontario breakfast, but you will meet all sorts of other types of producers there as well as some of the great agribusinesses in that area. We just have the most amazing local committee that have jumped all in. Plus, they've been waiting since 2020. And, we're still looking for some more volunteers, but tickets are going great, and we're expecting a super day.
And you have another event coming up in October, right?
Yeah, we're being overly ambitious this year. We've got 3 events this year. So on October the 21st, if Napanee's too far away, we are going to Chatham, Kent for a really unique opportunity at the Laprise Farm, and they are specializing in Brussels sprouts. So we'll be doing a really unique event down there. It's kind of our first foray into a breakfast on the farm at a place like this. There should be crops being harvested, and people will get to learn a lot more about kind of some of the hort crops in Ontario. So excited about that one too.
Hey, really neat. Last thing, some information about the August 26th event. Where can listeners go?
Yeah, so if people want to attend or want to volunteer, they just need to go to our website, which is farmfoodcareon for Ontario.org. All the information is up there on the homepage, and they can click. We're looking for volunteers. We'd love to have guests. If you have family or friends that live in Eastern Ontario, send the link to them and encourage them to go. That would be super.
Well, Kelly, hey, it's always great to have you on Real Agriculture. Thanks for making time. Good luck on August 26th.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks so much to Kelly and to Bern. Now we're going to take a quick break, and I will be back with a discussion with Aaron Morgan from the Ontario Sheep Farmers about a decision to increase the license fee starting in October.
Did you know that Pioneer now has a full lineup of Enlist E3 soybeans? Take a look at Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans for the highest yield potential and for the best agronomic package and herbicide trait options. From the lab to the field, Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans are the best in beans, period. Ask your local Pioneer representative about Enlist E3 beans.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from realagriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith, and joining me now on the line for the very first time is Erin Morgan. She's the Executive Director of Ontario Sheep Farmers. Erin, welcome here.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
All right, so Erin, it is your first time on the show, at least with me, but I don't think you've been on before. But you're almost a year in to this Executive Director role, which time flies, I suppose. How has the year gone? What has been perhaps one of the more interesting parts of this new role for you?
Well, the year has gone extremely well, I think. I have really enjoyed my time. It's been fun. I guess the best part is just meeting everybody, meeting new people, and learning about a new sector. I have worked in agriculture for my whole career, but this is the first time working with sheep farmers. So there's been a lot to learn, but it's been a lot of fun.
Yes, it is a fascinating sector. I, of course, full disclosure, and anyone who listens to the show often knows that I'm also a sheep farmer, so we'll put that up front here in Ontario. And it is what I love about sheep farmers in general. We tend to be a pretty diverse group. We have many women, many husband-wife team, partner teams involved, which is always really neat, and lots of new faces and young faces that join this industry. It's one of the few that people actually enter. As far as, first generation farmers and stuff like that. So that's one of the things that I enjoy. And definitely, yes, different than a lot of others. So kind of cool. But one of the reasons that I've got you on the show today is because for the first time in 13 years, the license fee that producers or a seller would pay when they sell a sheep in Ontario is going up from $1.80 to $2.20 per head. Erin, first, I want to clarify. Ontario Sheep Farmers calls it a license fee and not checkoff. So why the difference?
Yeah, so checkoff is a word that everybody uses just sort of as a they use it in place of license fees all the time. But checkoff actually historically has meant just what it sounds like. You checked off whether you were paying or not, or you would check off where you wanted your funds to go. So a checkoff is typically not mandatory. But in the province of Ontario, we call it a license fee in order to differentiate it. And under the Farm Products Marketing Commission regulations, it's called a license fee because it is mandatory and it is under sort of the provincial regulations for all regulated farm products, not just sheep.
That's right. Okay. All right. I wanted to make that clear. Of course, yeah, you're right. We do, as producers or as an industry, will often refer to it as the checkoff, but it is technically the license fee. So it is going up from the $1.80 per head to $2.20 plus tax, which is 13% here in Ontario, just so everybody knows. Where is this money going to go, or why the increase? Why now after 13 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sign of the times. Costs are going up. And in 2021, the Ontario Sheep Farmers Board launched their new strategic plan as a 5-year strategic plan called Building Strength for a Better Future. And in that strategic plan, there was it was actually built from grassroots input. And so our board asked our members, what is it that you want for the future? And there were lots of things that the members really wanted from their farm organization, including more investment in marketing, more investment in research, more investment or better communications, better dialogue with the members. And so all of those things, along with educational resources and all of those things are now coming into place. I was handed the strategic plan when I started almost a year ago, and really took a look at what do we need to put in place within the organization. And the board has spent a lot of time talking about it. And so included in the budget for 2023-24 is some market research work, international market research, as well as domestic market research. A project where we're going out to talk to each one of our processors and auction markets in Ontario to talk about what they need in order to basically get more information for both to our organization, but also for themselves, and get that included in some projects that are happening with some of our other industry partners. We have a wool pilot project. We have new courses for education, and we're building out what we're calling the Sheep Institute, which is a much broader educational initiative that we'll build over the next 5 years. So there's lots of things. And one of the ways that we're going to improve the relationship with our members across the province is by having somebody in that role dedicated to improving the dialogue with our districts and our members, and getting information about webinars and educational opportunities, getting that out to the grassroots. So those are some of the things that are included in the new budget. It's
a long list, and as you said, so it does include the creation of a new role, and certainly some pilot projects, research projects, and other things that Ontario Sheep is undertaking. What has now this news just came out recently? Has there been initially anyway a lot of pushback or feedback on the increase, or has it been positive?
Well, I'm not sure that an increase is ever initially felt to be positive, but I do think that some of the feedback that I've seen is on both sides, where yes, it's never a good thing to be billed more money, but if on the other hand, there's value seen, and also 13 years is a really long time to go without raising your fees, and so I think that there is some understanding. I hope that there's some understanding within the industry that at some point fees have to go up in order to pay the bills and achieve the new initiatives within the organization.
So now I'm sure this will be a hot topic. We should mention it does come into force October 1, which is I think Ontario Sheep's fiscal year runs October 1, I think, or somewhere around there.
September 1st.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
September 1st,
so it's
but we're
close.
giving everybody a little bit longer of a runway, especially because the license fee is collected by our processors in our auction markets. And so we're giving them a couple of months to get it into their accounting systems.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. But it will be, I'm sure, a hot topic at the annual general meeting happening end of October. What are the dates, Aaron, and where can people go for more information about the annual general meeting?
Yeah, so our annual general meeting is at the end of October on the 27th. We have an education day the day before on October 26th. If you'd like to attend in person, it's at the Nottawasaga Inn in Alliston, Ontario. And if you'd like to participate online, there's an option as well for Zoom for the meeting. And all the information is on the ontariosheep.org website.
All right. Wonderful. Okay. Aaron, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
It's now time for a product spotlight with Koch Agronomic Services, and right now we're joined by Tom Barry, based out of Saskatchewan. What is the high cost of some low-rate stabilizers?
Well, not all nitrogen stabilizers have the same or even comparable rates of active ingredients in them. And so our products in particular, if you compare Super U on the market, Super U has over 9,000 parts per million of active ingredient. That's broken apart between 8,500 parts per million of dicyandiamide and then over 600 parts per million of NBPT, which is agrotine. So, those rates, when we compare that to the market, there's a lot of products on the market right now that don't even have, 1,500 parts per million of combined. And that would be on the high side, Sean. The highest products barely have 1,500 parts per million of total.
That's a significant difference for sure. Defendyourn.ca, right? Also, they could talk to their local retailer?
Yeah.
Hey, great stuff. Hey, Tom, thanks so much for joining us here today on RealAg Radio.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by Claas. Introducing the all-new Claas Xerion 12 series, delivering unmatched power and performance in the big 4x4 tractor range. Discover more at claas.com. That's Claas with 2 A's. All right. Joining me very shortly is Gabriel Ribeiro. He's with the University of Saskatchewan. And I did want to just mention that this interview is somewhat condensed. It's still pretty long, but I did take out a bit so that it would fit for radio. So there is a discussion on the animal welfare side as well as the time it takes for animals to recover from ergot poisoning. So if you want to hear the entire interview, please head over to realagriculture.com. We'll have the full interview there. All right, without further ado, here's my discussion with Dr. Gabriel Ribeiro. Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and joining me now is Dr. Gabriel Ribeiro. He's an associate professor with the University of Saskatchewan and the Saskatchewan Beef Industry Chair. Gabriel, I'm sorry that I say your name as I do. How should I really say your name?
Gabriel Ribeiro, but that's perfect. That's okay.
That is my version of your name, so thank you for that. Okay, but Gabriel, I want to talk about ergot. And there are many people, I think, who still don't know what ergot is or what impact it has. And I'm just going to share just quickly, and for anyone who's listened to this show on a regular basis, last summer I had sheep on pasture and I had lambs. And we ended up with ergot poisoning of our lambs on pasture, which is not something we really ever anticipated. And I will share that it was awful. So that's part of the motivation for this interview is learning more about what ergot is and how it impacts animals. And of course the safety evident diets, which is exactly what you research. So let's start, Gabriel, with what is ergot?
Okay, so thanks for having me first here. Like, it's a pleasure to be talking to you here. And so what's ergot? So ergot is just a plant disease that caused by a fungi called Claviceps purpurea. So this is the most common fungi that affects the cereal grains or the forages here in Canada. So there, in other parts of the world, there's different types of fungi that affects plants that causes disease, quite similar to what we see here, but they would have other species. And so that fungi causes that infection in the plant during the flowering stage of that plant, mostly cereal grain and grasses, also some grasses. So it's very common that people are not aware, but some forages can also develop ergot. Usually the most susceptible plants are open pollinated plants, and then during the flowering stage they get infected with that fungi. And then that fungi develops and then replace the seed of that plant or that forage or cereal grain with ergot sclerotia that we call that it's actually this purplish kind of black bodies, right? And those are full of alkaloids, so the fungi kind of develops and produces these alkaloids, which are quite toxic to cattle.
So if anyone, so I'm going to paint the picture here because I am now much more aware of ergot for bad reasons, but that's why we're doing this, so more people are maybe aware, that if you were to look at, say, a cereal grain, so like rye, because you did say open pollinated, so certain species are more prone to ergot. So something like rye where on the head you'll notice like a purplish or black sort of body instead of the seed. That's the key part, right? It sort of grows where the seed would.
Yeah, that's correct. So usually they're a little bit longer, sometimes a little bit like than the normal kind of like seed of that plant, and definitely rye would be the most susceptible plant we have. So usually, if you have rye, it's almost 100% of the times you will have some quantity of ergot. It's just how much. But now we are seeing more happening in wheat over the years, and even in barley we have seen some happening too, and definitely on the native grasses and other types of grasses we've seen that it's increasing. So it looks like in the last 10 or 15 years we have seen a quite large increase in the occurrence of ergot. However, we need to be careful because it's very year-to-year dependent. So some years we don't have any, some years we have a lot. And a lot of that is related to the weather, right? So if it's a cooler and like with more like moisture during the flowering stage, then we have more likelihood of having that. If it's drier during that stage, then probably be a little bit less. Having said that, that doesn't mean we don't have issues during the drought years. Like this year has been pretty dry here in Western Canada. But we still hear quite a bit of problems happening, and I'm getting a lot of calls lately. And a lot of this has been related to like use of screenings, right? So those screenings, it's maybe old grain or old screenings from previous years that have been like stored, and then because price of feed is so high, people are looking for alternatives. So then they become an option, and they start to use this lower quality feed and can be quite high in ergot. So we got to be a bit careful with that.
Mm-hmm. So, and that's before we get to including it in rations and what is safe. Let's talk about how it impacts the animal. So what a producer might see in an animal as far as symptoms of ergot poisoning. Because as you said, it's these alkaloids that are in that ergot body that are quite toxic. What does it look like when an animal has been impacted by ergot?
That's a good question. And we want to kind of tell people that's always one way, but there's different forms that can kind of show in cattle, so we got to be a bit careful. One of the first things that happen, and sometimes it in a specific, so it can be with different disease, but it's a reduction in intake and performance. So animals will really eat less of that feed, and then they start to gain less. And sometimes the producer won't be able to catch that quick enough, but that really happens early on. And then later, when the problem gets to be bigger, if the quantities are high enough, then we can start to see a different form. So there's a form that we call that cause kind of gangrene. So which that means is you have vasoconstriction of the blood vessels in the extremity of the body of the animal. So then the animal can lose its tail, lose its ears, and even kind of start having lameness and can lose the hoof too. So that's kind of very, very in extreme cases that can happen. But then we have other type of ergo symptoms it's what we saw in our study is during the summer. Because of that effect on the vessels, the blood vessels, the vasoconstrictions, so it kind of prevents or reduces the ability of the animal to control its body temperature, to lose heat through the skin. So then an animal starts to show symptoms of heat stress, even when temperature is not very, very high, like around 20 degrees in a sunny day, which most animals would be doing fine. They were showing really bad signs of heat stress, which they were panting and having their tongue out and extended, and they would eat much, much less and would be just trying to drink a lot of water, and then they start to urinate a lot. And then sometimes we also see that they make puddles of water or mud in the ground and just want to lay down in that puddle of water or mud to just lose or try to dissipate some of that heat because they're really having trouble with that. And then if you have pregnant animals, then you can have an impact on pregnancy and all of that too. You can have calf losses and all of that. So pregnancy losses. So it's a bad disease. Yeah, we got to be careful.
You've done a wonderful job of explaining how awful it is because, and I will share personally, we had lambs that honestly the ears had, as you mentioned, sort of gangrenous, sort of died off, that the whole ear sort of came away and kind of fell. It was awful. No one ever wants to see their animals go through this. And so we did eventually get to where it was ergot poisoning. So they were surprisingly on pasture, but there was, as you mentioned, the right weather for the development, the right species of forage grasses that had it, and we were managing the grazing, so they had to eat where they were. And so this is what we ended up with. So in a feedlot or in a grain feeding scenario, so as you mentioned, and I'm glad you mentioned screenings because that's been a big question is, can I use screenings to extend my hay supply or, to put some pounds of gain on animals more inexpensively when feed is in tight supply. But your work, as for the past 4 years, you've been looking at what's a safe amount. Obviously, some the animals can handle, but for cattle, when do we know it is just too much? Is there a guideline?
There's some recommendations by the CFIA in terms of kind of limits where you should, they recommend not going above certain limits, and I will discuss them a little bit. But one thing before we talk about that is those limits are. It's very difficult to assess the perfect limit because it's so difficult to sample properly the feed. Because that sampling for mycotoxins and for ergot, because it's not evenly distributed sometimes in the feed, so it's very hard to get a perfect sample, and the methodology is also very hard. It's a difficult method to analyze. However, we've evolved quite a bit. We have some good methodologies now, but it's still not very simple. It's not just any lab that can do that analysis. So we got to be careful that we are using a good lab. So if you go through the recommendations by CFIA, and they've been thinking about changing them, they say maximum levels would be between 2 to 3 ppm or parts per million of total ergo alkaloids, and that's not the ergo body, hey, that's the ergo alkaloids. So. And we suggest or recommend the producers to send samples, try to take the best sample they can, really take the spotted samples all across the grain or the feed that they're using, a good sample, the best they can, and send for analysis of total ergo-alkaloids if they have a question about it or if they are worried about it, having a problem with ergot, because just assessing if there's ergo bodies, it sometimes not very precise, because in that ergo body, we've seen that there's a lot of variability. Some bodies can be really full in alkaloids and some not, and it doesn't have much alkaloids in it. So it's not super precise. So just doing that. But in our work, we showed that even much lower levels than what is recommended as a maximum limit, according to the to CFIA, it was already pretty bad. So we fed from 0, 0.75, 1.5, and 3 ppm, and we saw that above 0.75, when we fed 1.5 ppm, animals started to show symptoms already. So they were not eating and performing as well. And then when we fed on 3 ppm, they were kind of showing signs of toxicity that we have had actually to take the animals off that diet, off the trial, because of that problem.
Fascinating stuff. So this is really interesting stuff, but also really important to drive home for anyone who's buying feed or is potentially thinking about, buying screenings or trying to save money on feed in any way, to be aware of for sure. And as you mentioned, you can test. But you did mention, of course, you have to be testing for the alkaloids, not just the presence of ergot bodies, which you can see them. They're visible. But you did say you absolutely have to send it to a lab that can actually test for the level of the alkaloids in the feed.
Yeah, that's right. So the problem is, like I said, there's different concentrations in the ergot body itself. And then another thing is sometimes you have a ground sample, so you can't really see, right? Sometimes if you're working with something that has been processed already, then you won't see. So there is a lot of those factors that will affect that. And definitely analyzing the total ergo-alkaloids, that would be the best practice I think we would recommend. In terms of the screenings and doing, I think we definitely can use, and cattle is a great animals to use those byproducts. Definitely they can really do a really good job, or not just cattle but sheep and any ruminant, right? They're really good at using byproducts and making like high quality meat and milk. But we need to do some risk assessment in terms of like, is there a chance that there is some toxins, mycotoxins, ergot in it? And usually on screenings there's the risk is higher compared to like barley or wheat or other type of grain, right? So because in the screening you're concentrating all that like that junk, right? Like all that small like seeds that don't have the right shape and all of that. So then the risk is higher. And then if you're working with screenings of like maybe canola, you might not be worried, right? But if you're working with screenings from like cereal grains or rye and other things, then you got to be really careful because the risk is higher. And after you do some risk assessment in terms of like, do I think there is a risk that these samples may have ergot? If you think there is a good risk, I think definitely take a sample the best you can, do that sample from like all portions of that load, and combine that sample, mix well, take a nice representative sample and send it for analysis of total ergo-alkaloids. And when you're asking for that sample, just make sure that the lab actually can do the method, which is the correct method, which is usually based on a HPLC method, right?
Very good advice. All right. Gabriel, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. This is absolutely fascinating stuff. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure, Lyndsey. Like, I'm happy to talk to you, so call me anytime. All
right. We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
Hey, welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and for our final segment, well, it's brought to you by Co-op. When it comes to the productivity and efficiency of your operation, every decision counts. One of those decisions is how you fuel your equipment. You need to be sure that it will run efficiently and without unnecessary downtime. Count on Co-op and your local Co-op fuel team to keep your equipment running smoothly with seasonally blended, high-quality fuels and premium lubricants with guaranteed performance. We are Western Canadian. We are fueling harvest. We are Co-op. All right, as promised, I did say I would do some news, so here you go. We've got more than a few things going on. I did want to start with maybe a bit of a good news story, so congrats to Greg and Sarah Stamp out of Enchant, Alberta. They've been named Alberta's Outstanding Young Farmers of the Year, so super cool. Of course, each province chooses their Outstanding Young Farmers, and then there is a national event later in the year. So great job, Greg and Sarah. Congrats to you. All right, we've heard back from CN Rail. So if you head on over to RealAgriculture.com, you can hear Kelvin Hepner's interview with David Shednovic. He's with CN Rail, and CN has come out and is rather critical of the interswitching, the extended interswitching pilot project that's going to be happening. Both CN and CP have both said, and I suppose it's CPKC now, but they've both said that this is going to be incredibly difficult for them to manage. There's also new work rest rules, which similar to, if you've been following along on the trucking side of things, we've got new rules in place. And of course, with electronic logging, we've got new rules in place as to how many hours truckers can be driving. We've got similar rules coming into play in the railway industry, and CN says that this is going to be incredibly disruptive, and they can't yet tell just how much of a disruption it might be on the upcoming year and grain movement. So we'll be keeping tabs on that. But if you want to hear the full conversation, head on over to realagriculture.com. While you're there, if you're on the main page, just scroll on down to our poll. So now there will also be a post on this that you can find, so you can search if you want, or you can just scroll down. And our question this week is pre-harvest glyphosate increasing, decreasing, or staying the same on your farm? And you can also say that it's never been a practice or not a common practice on your farm as well. But this is, of course, for many out west, this is a time where you might be considering a pre-harvest pass of glyphosate. In Ontario, it does get used every once in a while, depending on conditions. I do want to note, a pre-harvest pass of glyphosate is a herbicide pass. It is not a desiccant, although sometimes we call it that. It is not a true desiccant. It's a herbicide and works like a herbicide. So it is a slower dry down, but it will do the job. It will kill the plant. It will kill any weeds, which can be incredibly helpful. The problem is, two things. One, if used too early, that glyphosate can translocate to the head, so to the wheat or the cereal. It also potentially could be picked up as a residue. And so one of the bigger issues, for sure, has also been that some buyers have simply said, we're not going to take the risk. Any grain that's been treated with a pre-harvest pass is not going to qualify for whatever program it is. And I'm thinking now of oats. That certainly was the case in 2021. So we want to know, with the increasing pressure about glyphosate use, with the increasing pressure from buyers, is pre-harvest glyphosate something that you're doing more of, less of, or about the same? So head on over and let us know on that one. All right, we've also got some good news on the clubroot front, at least for the research side of things. So the Alberta Canola Producers Commission and the Saskatchewan Canola Development Commission, along with ARDAR, which is the Results-Driven Agriculture Research Network in Alberta, has awarded Dr. Stephen Strelkov with $1.2 million in funding to look at breeding resistance into existing or new crop varieties, developing new ways to control clubroot, and to help identify clubroot resistant genes. So this is a 5-year project, starts this year, and let's hope that there's some significant advances made out of this research, because of course we know clubroot is an incredibly extensive and very costly disease of canola. It is certainly making certain areas of Alberta and perhaps even Saskatchewan very difficult to continue to have canola in the rotation as much as farmers would like, and definitely a devastating impact. So yeah, 1.25 million there. Sticking with Alberta, we've also got news on agri-stability. So this is, of course, the Federal Business Risk Management Program, agri-stability. The federal government has reopened the application window and has made a new deadline of September 29th. So farmers and ranchers, you can now sign up for, if you didn't before, agri-stability through Alberta's Agriculture Financial Services Corp, so AFSC, until end of September. So if you did not apply by the June 30th deadline, you do have some extra time to potentially apply for this program. This is the one that, of course, supports farmers should their margin decline. I believe it's 30%, and then farmers are compensated 80 cents on the dollar, up from 70 cents, which was one of the changes to agri-stability that came out just a little while ago. All right. It does feel, doesn't it, that this has been a very Alberta-centric news. And that's, I don't know why. I'll be honest, but hey, Alberta's got things moving and shaking. What can we say? I did want to cover, there's a few other things of note. We do have some new funding announced for Ontario, so bringing it out east. There was an announcement made by the provincial government, this is also under SCAP, for $10 million to go to processors to upgrade equipment. Each processor, federal or provincially inspected, can access up to $125,000 for each business, potentially, to upgrade their equipment and those sorts of things. This is one of the ones that I think many people sort of on the surface are glad to see. Certainly processor capacity has been a concern for the livestock sector here in Ontario. But as some of our keen listeners and readers pointed out, $125,000 doesn't go very far if you've got a lot of equipment to upgrade. So we shall see how that program gets used. It is an answer to what some people were concerned about, but perhaps not the full answer that a lot of people were looking for. And well, finally, we talked about it on the Friday Issues panel as well, but did want to remind everyone that we do have the results, and we'll be rolling out sort of more key points of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index survey that we did in July. The results are out now. One of the key things that we saw in that survey that was sort of in addition to, was we asked farmers about consolidation in the industry, and farmers were most concerned about the consolidation on the equipment dealership side, and there's a fascinating discussion to be had on that one. We'll be digging into it more, but there is a post on RealAgriculture.com that does look at how farmers feel about equipment consolidation and why that one, that was 66%, said that was the highest concern and has a negative impact on their operations. So some really interesting data to come out of this survey. I highly recommend you check it out. Stick around here on RealAg Radio because we'll be talking about it more as well. All right, and with that, that's it. That's the news. I made it. Thanks, everyone, for joining me. Thank you for joining me on Tuesdays. I'm really enjoying it. I hope that you are as well. Would love to get your feedback. You can find me online at RealLoudLyndsey. That's LYNDSEY. Or just find Real Agriculture. We're on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. I guess that's called X now, whatever. Or you can call that RealAg feedback line, 1-855-776-6147. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you want to hear. Or if you just think we're just plain out to lunch, we don't mind. Let us know. All right, your regular host, Sean Haney, will be back tomorrow, 4:30 Eastern, right here on Rural Radio, channel 147. Cheers, everybody.